So this is the topic on which I'll be sharing my views today, responsible fisheries, path to sustainable growth. Now, why we should be talking about responsible fisheries? For that, I would just like to give some background of the changing perspectives in fisheries management. Now, if we go back a few decades, like I would say from in the early 60s, when the mechanization program started in India, a lot of boats were mechanized and new boats, existing boats were mechanized and new fishing boats were introduced, especially trawlers. So in the 60s and 70s, that was the period when there were a lot of mechanization happening. So because of that, our production also increased considerably over the years. And the trawling was the main fishing practice which contributed maximum to the fisheries production, marine fisheries production. And we were looking at the target resource. So basically, it was a combination of fishing activity and target resource. The objective was to increase production. It was, we were trying to have more and more production. But after, say, 2-3 decades, we realized that the sustainability of resources was at stake, because what was happening was that when in the food web, when the predatory fishes at the top, they are targeted and their population comes down, naturally their production of their prey fishes increases, and that leads to some imbalance in the entire marine food chain. So it was felt necessary to have an ecosystem approach. So we moved from the fishing activity and a target resource to an ecosystem approach, where ecosystem was equally important. And in this context came the concept of sustainability, which is, of course, very well ingrained in marine conservation and governance programs, and unsustainable fishing practices, which started damaging our ecosystem process. Not only the target, it also included the carbon capture potential of the ocean. The carbon dioxide started increasing because of the increasing mechanized fishing. So earlier, it was always the MSY, that is the maximum sustainable yield, which was always considered while deciding the marine fisheries policy. Then, over a period of time, as I said earlier, the need was felt for holistic definition of sustainability, which included ecological, social, economic, and environmental well-being. Now, the sustainable development, it seeks to link with the concept of environmental sustainability with economic development, and this is especially true in the case of developing countries. Majority of the commercially targeted fish are predatory, so their removal would have major ecological implications. Now, when the carbon dioxide production is increasing due to increase in number of mechanized boats and increased mechanized fishing, so the ocean's capacity to absorb the carbon dioxide is impacted, which accelerates both climate change and ocean acidification. Now, the latest figures of FAO show that when we are talking about the global fisheries, 33% of global fisheries are overfished beyond MSY. That means almost 1/3 of the fisheries. About 60% are maximum sustainably fished. 7% are underfished. So still there is scope for 7% is still underfished, but only thing is 33% is already overfished. Now the sustainable development goals, there are 7 sustainable development goals, and I have just selected 3 of those which are relevant to my topic today. That is SDG 12, that is responsible consumption and production. 13 is climate action, and 14 is life below water, which talks about the which is conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. This so these 3 take care of the conservation, management of the resources, sustainable development, and even the responsible consumption and production. Now, when we are talking about sustainability in fisheries, it is important to know the strong pillars on which the sustainability should remain. And these are biological, environmental, social, and economic. So initially, we were only looking at, as I said, we were talking about the MSY, that is maximum sustainable yield. So only the biological sustainability. Then came it was observed that the environment was getting degraded, the substratum was getting damaged, and so many anthropogenic activities were causing pollution in the oceans and seas, including the plastic debris and other types of debris, and which was also some of the communities, fishing communities, were left out from the social economic growth and social inclusion. So these 4, it is necessary to consider under the sustainability. Now, what has so far caused this situation is adoption of certain unsustainable fishing practices, which has led to long-term losses in the biological and economic productivity, biological diversity, and impacting ecosystem structure in a way that impairs functioning of the exploited system across several generations. Now, when we talk about unsustainable fishing, the 3 main components are: one is overfishing, destructive fishing, and IUU fishing. These are the main components. Subcomponents will be there in these 3 main components, but overfishing, destructive fishing, and IUU fishing. Now, overfishing is like when you have, as it is illustrated on the right side, that is when so many boats are chasing very few fishes, that becomes a sort of a scene of overfishing. Whereas actually it should be the right-hand part where optimum number of boats should be chasing the fish resource. Because what happens is when overfishing happens, it alters not only the target resource, it also changes the species which are associated or which are dependent on the target resource. That means, as I said earlier, prey and predators in the oceans. So it changes the trophic relationships within the ecosystem. And this imbalance which is created, which is not good for the environment and the sustainability of the resource. So, and it will also alter the habitat in which fishing occurs. Now, destructive fishing means what? It is, the term itself is, it destroys. It destroys something like, so the destructive fishing practices like poisoning, blast fishing or dynamiting, electrical fishing or ghost fishing. So all these are destructive fishing, which highly adversely impacts the ecosystem and the fishery. Many of these are all banned, the fishing practices, but still they are carried on. So after all this, what we need to avoid, that means what is it that we should be avoiding? We'll see later what is to be done. So what is to be avoided is overexploitation, that is the overfishing part. Then ecological damage, again consequence of overfishing. Then environmental degradation and economic waste. Now economic waste, because there is so much of overcapacity, fishing capacity in the marine sector, that when too many boats are operating, the catch per unit effort also reduces, and hence the economics also is badly affected. Now, ghost fishing is when the nets are either abandoned or deliberately abandoned, or they get dissociated from the boat. And this is environmentally deleterious, and the fish caught is also wasted because the fish gets entangled in the nets and that remains in the ocean itself. So it normally occurs with passive fishing gears such as long lines, gill nets, entangling nets, trammel nets, traps, and pods. So now these are the components of the sustainability. And coming to what are the components of responsible fisheries? Now we can say the soul of responsible fisheries is what we call the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, or commonly it is called the Code. So that is the, I think at present that must be the most, I can say most cited or most diffused code in the fishery sector. That means it is spread far and wide. And what is that code? In brief, I have to just say it, put it simply, these are the principles and international standards for responsible practices. Or in other words, these are the do's and don'ts. It's like a guide, what we should be doing and what we should be avoiding. So that is what the code does. The main components of the code are sustainable exploitation and production, conservation, conservation of ecosystems and biodiversity, economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental health. So this becomes a very comprehensive or a holistic approach to management. That means we are taking care of the sustainable production, then the production, how it is, the resources are conserved, not only the resources, the ecosystem also, without leaving the social inclusion part and economic growth, and keeping the environmental health in mind. So these are the main components. Now this, I am not going into the details of all articles. There are about 12 articles in CCRF. The first 5 are the introductory articles. Sixth one is the article with general principles, and the remaining 5 are the remaining 6. These are the thematic articles, which each article considers different sectors. Like Article 8 covers fishing, 9 aquaculture development, then 10 is integrating fisheries into coastal area management, then 11 is post-harvest practices and trade, and 12 fisheries research. Now, when we are talking about the responsible fisheries, when we want to understand the unsustainable practices and fishing which is happening, so the Article 8 fishing operations is the one which deals with all the aspects of fishing operations. Now, so that means now we will just go through the what are the technologies for responsible fishing. They can be clubbed under 3 headings, that is selective fishing gears and methods, use of environment-friendly fishing gears such as semi-pelagic trawls, and low energy environmentally responsible fishing practices. So in all these 3, you can see that the environment is also a component of the management aspect. Now coming to the first one, that is the selective fishing gears and methods. Now these are for the technologies for conservation of marine fish resources. Now the fishing gears and methods should be selective enough to reduce 3 components, that is bycatch, discards, and their impact on the dependent species. Because bycatch is any catch other than the targeted catch, and discards are which are thrown back into the sea, either in the dead form or live, but most of the times it is dead fish which is thrown back. And what are the impacts? So they should be selective enough to keep the impact to the minimum, because we cannot say that there will be 0 impact. There is going to be minimal impact. So that's what we should be aiming. So now to reduce bycatch, we have to incorporate certain devices in the fishing gear, which are called the bycatch reduction devices. And this is to reduce the bycatch. Now the bycatch could include even the endangered resources like turtles when they are called turtle excluder devices, or it could be to exclude smaller size fishes or the juveniles. And so this is a technology which helps to reduce bycatch in a trawl. Now these are just some of the designs of bycatch reduction devices. The idea is to retain the catch which is targeted and exclude what is not required. So it should be a balance between this retention and exclusion, especially in gears like trawl, because which cannot be totally exclusion or total retention. So it should be striking a balance between exclusion and retention. Now discards are maximum, especially in bottom trawling. And this is something which poses a threat to marine biodiversity. So increased discards alters food webs by supplying increased levels of food to scavenging organisms on the seafloor and to seabirds. And there are 3 types of discards, which are called regulatory discards, discretionary, and high grading. Regulatory discards means these are the resources which should not be landed, or they are against the regulations, which has to be discarded. Then discretionary discards, it depends on the discretion of the skipper of the vessel or the owner. And the high grading is, especially this happens in the shrimp season, when along with the shrimps, whatever the fishes come, even if they are high value, sometimes because of the catch of shrimps, these are discarded. Now, the latest figures of discards, these are estimated at 9.1 million tons, which represent 11% of the annual average catch. And the majority of these discards come from the bottom trawls. All the others, like boat seines, gillnet fisheries, longline, these are all with the minimal discards. And relatively high discards associated with persins and midwater trawls, relatively. Now, fisheries targeting tunas and other pelagic species have the lowest discard rates, while fisheries targeting crustaceans have the highest discard rates. Now, the eco-friendly trawl. Now, trawling, many of the fishing systems we call destructive. Even a trawl, if it is used appropriately, I mean appropriate by that, what I mean is either in the appropriate area or appropriately rigged. That is, if the net can be held slightly off bottom, that does not harm the seabed. So it is an eco-friendly trawl. So trawling per se may not be destructive, but if used either in coral reefs or seagrass beds, etc., it is destructive. Now, if it is operated slightly off bottom, that is by making certain alterations to the midwater trawl, but heavier water boats compared to midwater trawl, and if they are operated in the fishing grounds, it will have lesser impact on the benthic fauna and flora. Now, some of the passive fishing methods are considered environmentally responsible. That means their impact on the environment is minimal. For example, gillnets, lines, pots, traps. Now, these are also beneficial from the energy point of view because they are passive methods. Fishing with gillnets is highly size selective, but it's not species selective. It's environmentally responsible and low energy. Long lines are size selective and energy efficient. Now, trolling is another type of line fishing, which is a responsible method because the catch can be immediately thrown back in the live condition. And traps and pots have lower unintended catch and less seafloor impact. Now, how to select the energy efficient harvesting method? Now, whether it is an active gear or a passive gear, how much energy is being used, it is in relation to the catch which is landed by that gear. So the active gears like trawl, it consumes about 0.5 to 1.5 liters per kg of fish landed. Whereas in the case of perceive, it is 0.1 liters per kg of fish landed, and passive gears like gillnets and lines, etc., it is 0.1 to 0.4 liters per kg of fish landed. So it depends whether the method is a bulk fish catching or individual fish catching. So now coming to the second aspect, that is the energy conservation, because first is the responsible fishing, what is happening, choosing the right type of gear and the method. But we cannot ignore how much energy is being consumed in the process of fish production. Because we are aware that fishing methods like trawling, which are active methods, are the most energy intensive food production methods compared to other food production methods. So how the energy in these can be conserved, because that also comes in the sustainability. So I have listed 4 themes under this. That is how the energy can be conserved in fishing gear, and how we use them, so the methods, then modifications in the vessel, under the vessel technology, then adoption of advanced technology, and conservation and enhancement of fishery resources through artificial reefs and fish aggregation devices. Now, fishing gear and vessel design and operation. We know that by making certain small changes in the design and in the way in which they are operated, we can save energy. So, like, for example, a small change like use of cambered otter boats, or use of smart trawl design, using advanced materials which have great strength and which can reduce the trawl resistance by about 20%, which is quite significant. So this way, there could be certain, by making some changes in the rigging and operation, energy conservation can be achieved. Or in the same way, adoption of advanced technology in the case of vessel, choice of appropriate engines, and improve fuel efficiency of fishing craft, reduction of speed, large propeller with low RPM, etc. So these are some of the measures by which the energy utilization can be reduced in fishing operations. Now, if a properly designed hull will be able to operate the gear with less energy. Similarly, the choice of designs of the machinery, reduction gear, propeller design, and in the picture, what you see, a cot nozzle. So just by adopting this cot nozzle around the propeller, there could be reduction in the fuel consumption. Or nowadays, we are also talking about solar energy, which may not be sufficient for fishing operations as such, but they can be used for lighting, navigational lights, cabin lights, etc. So wherever some reduction in energy can be achieved, those can be done. Now, there are some advanced technologies which are being used in fishing, like a GPS or acoustic instruments like echo sounder, sonar, and gear monitoring system. Then use of remote sensing technology, use of geographical information system, and FADs and ARs. So adoption of all these can also reduce the energy conservation, because, for example, like when the fishermen are using potential fishing zones, which are commonly called the PF sets. So the fishermen can directly go to the fishing ground instead of scouting for the grounds. So the fuel is saved in reaching the fishing grounds. And so in when they are using PF set advisories, they know exactly the area of the fishing grounds. So it is a fuel saving measure. And nowadays, most of the fishers are also using this GPS. Now, these are all the space-based navigational systems which have helped in making the journey of fishers easier, and it has also helped in energy conservation. Now, geographical information system also, it's a computer-based system. So now using GIS, because it is possible to prepare some thematic maps which show the distribution and abundance of fishes spatially, which was not earlier, which was not happening. So now it is possible to map the distribution and abundance in relation to the environmental parameters. So the fishing grounds of juveniles, bycatch, and the fishing grounds of juveniles can be easily avoided. So these are just the what are the components of GIS: software, hardware, data, methods, and people. Now, to enhance fish stocks, one can adopt the technology of FADs. Now, FAD is not a new technology. It's an age-old technology which has been used by fishers for decades now. It is only what has changed is that it is now possible to have drifting FADs with markers with electronic transmitters. So it's easily traceable where the floating structures are in the sea. And this is many times also combined with the satellite communication. So it is easier to trace. Now this FADs adoption of this technology is good for, again, from both the angles, like energy conservation, because again, fuel spent on reaching the grounds is adjusted, and there is no time lost in looking for the fish. So just summing up the measures for reducing energy consumption, because when the more energy is consumed, we are all aware the greenhouse gas emissions are also increasing, and this creates imbalance again. So we need to keep these GHG emissions in check. And so the first point, what I have already discussed, the adoption of energy efficient fishing gear and vessels, use of low impact fuel efficient fishing methods and gears, enhancing fuel efficiency of fishing operations using advanced technologies, and fisheries management that reduces fishing effort and enhances fish stocks. Energy efficiency in trawling may be improved by adopting energy audit system. Like this point, energy audit system is something like how we have the audit for other sectors. In some of the developed countries, they go for energy audit system of large ships. So one can make out which areas in the vessel the energy reduction can be effected by certain measures. And another point is the inclusion of emission in fish product eco-labeling in future would help awareness at consumer level. Now this eco-labeling and traceability, like this is also important for sustainability, because at least then the consumer is aware where his product has, what he's consuming has come from. So this is another measure. Now coming to revalidated marine fisheries resource potential of India in 2018, because in 2018 the revalidated figures are much higher than the earlier figures. Now the revalidated figures show that conventional resources in the EZ is potential is 5.31 MMT, million metric tons, and non-conventional resources is 1.85 MMT. So it is more than 7 million metric tons, the potential, which earlier was almost half of this, or slightly more than half. So we also should be looking at the now non-conventional resources. On the right-hand side, which we see, the oceanic squids and myctophages, jellyfish, etc. Now, for this, we should be adopting the deep sea fishing technologies. So the revalidated figure shows it is 7.158 million tons. And this low level of harnessing of deep sea fisheries resources in EEZ and high seas has provided opportunity for harnessing these resources, especially the tuna resources in the EEZ and high seas. Now, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they are blessed because actually it accounts for almost 30%. It's only slightly less than the 1/3 of the total EEZ of India. But the fish production from the EEZ of these islands is about 1% of the estimated potential. So here there is a huge scope for development of sustainable fisheries. Now, fishing gears for deep sea. Since we are all talking about sustainability and responsible fisheries, the gears which would be eco-friendly in the deep seas would be multi-filament and monofilament, tuna long lining, bottom set gill net, then also bottom set vertical long lining, squid jigging, and trap fishing. Now, discussion on sustainability would be incomplete without discussing something about the IUU fishing, because it's a major component in the unsustainability practices. So, IUU is illegal, unregulated, and unreported. Now, most of the fisheries, there is IUU fishing. The percentage might vary, that's all. It accounts for about 15% of total global catch, which can go even up to 30% in some of the high value fisheries. Now, the latest figures show that it represents up to 26 million tons of fish caught annually. Now, this is detrimental to biological, environmental, social, and economics. Now, how this is happening, the IUU, it can happen due to several, it can happen in several ways, like fishing without a license, using illegal gear, because each license is issued for using a particular gear. So using that license, if some other gear is used, it becomes illegal. Now, catching fish over the allocated quota in some of the temperate countries, then fishing in closed areas and seasons exceeding bycatch limits, non or partial reporting of data, submission of erroneous data, breaching of zonation. Breaching of zonation is that is between the territorial waters and the EEZ when there is a breach between these zones. Now, these are just showing the patterns of IUU, illegal transshipments in the east and the high seas, dynamite fishing, cyanide fishing. Then unreported could be from sport fishing, subsistence fishing, then landings underreporting by licensed fishers for whatever the reasons, then discards. So all these come under unreported. Now, to keep the IUU in check, the only option out of the other many options, most important is the vessel monitoring system, because this gives an idea of the movement of deep sea fishing vessels, and it is also a safety equipment for safety of fishing vessels, for safety of fishing vessels. Then with VMS, patrol boats reach directly without wasting time on searching the vessel, because you know exactly the targeted vessel is at any point of time. Now, then there are some technologies for safety of fishing vessels. Again, like in distress, there is what is called a distress alert transmitter, and fishers have to just switch on the relevant switch whether in case of a fire or whether the boat is sinking, medical emergency or any other emergency, there are 5-6 switches and they have to just press one of the switches. And certification, accreditation, traceability, and labeling. This, as I said earlier, because this helps us in knowing the from where the product is coming, whether it is from a overfished area or a MSY fished area, or from which area product is coming. So that said, eco-labeling is a market-based tool to promote sustainable use of fish resources. Now there are some there is some potential for these technologies, like development of ornamental fisheries, then technologies for sea cage farming in India, and technologies for seaweed cultivation. Now this is in the context of, because the capture fisheries are now getting saturated and the growth percentage is lesser in capture fisheries. So there can be a shift towards culture fisheries so that there could be a sustainable development. Like ornamental fisheries, India is blessed with good ornamental resources, whether it is freshwater or marine. Now freshwater, of which 98% are cultured and 2% are captured, whereas 20% of marine fishes, of which 98% are captured and 2% cultured. And we have now technologies available in India for cage farming of cobia, pompano, Asian sea bass, grouper, etc. And technologies for seaweed cultivation are also available. Now, the Sustainability in Action 2030 agenda, which speaks of the social, economic, environmental, and biological sustainability. Now, goals of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development: to end hunger, reduce poverty, and sustainably manage natural resources. Now, in this process, we may have to address certain issues, like I have listed some of the more important ones, like increased conflicts among stakeholders, artisanal and industrial fishers, loss of livelihoods, lower incomes, food insecurity, reduced nutrition, then economic and biological problems of overcapitalization and overfishing. Because there are two aspects. One is overcapitalization, which is increasing the fishing capacity, and it is leading to overfishing. So it is becoming a sort of vicious circle. So finally, before I end the session, I would say the right to fish carries with it the obligation to do so in a responsible manner. So that means we get the right with the responsibility. So we cannot be looking only at the right, our right to fish, but it comes with an obligation to do so in a responsible manner. That is where the responsible fisheries and sustainability both are they complement each other, actually, sustainability and the responsible fisheries. So thank you for patient hearing. I hope I have not crossed the time limit.
No, madam. Thank you very much, ma'am.